Fantastic, that's great. If we are going to record and then let's take it away.
Okay, I'm going to record.
Yeah.
And record, yeah.
Cheers.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Dear Vice-Chancellor was a campaign that originally came from my manifesto, and it then became our top gold joint manifesto this year. The campaign began in November and it was reached across all sites, both physically and online. We reached over 1,300 comments and the DVC results were split into 12 themes. We have put together a question from each theme based on the feedback from students. So our first question, some responses from students say they have felt unsupported by staff at the university or they have never had a response from their PAT. Are there any initiatives that can be put in place to resolve this?
Oh yes, Ria, that's a really good place to start because obviously the students will only have a good experience here if they have a good tutor, so the PAT, personal academic tutor. So what we're actually doing is more development for the tutors to make sure that they put students absolutely at the centre of their work. That includes good tutoring skills. Now, tutors have lives beyond university as well, so sometimes things get in the way. We need to make sure that doesn't affect the tutee. So yes, training for tutors, sharing of good practice, making sure that students can report very quickly if they feel that they haven't got that good connection with their tutor in year.
The largest theme that students commented on, with over 20% of responses, was facilities. And one of the comments that kept reoccurring was that students were wanting access to microwaves, kettles, even free hot water. Is this something that you're looking at it's like basic necessities for students to be able to access?
Yes, I'm starting to talk about this with Ian White, who's head of catering operations. And I know what students are after. They're after a place where they can kind of drop in and get a quick cup of coffee or microwave something and study perhaps at the same time or meet people at the same time. So it's kind of social space with a few more facilities than we would ordinarily have. So we're looking at places where we can put those, but the thing about them is that students have then got to be responsible for them and keep an eye on them because there won't be enough. I don't want them staffed all the time. They're informal student spaces. Yeah. So if we can work with the union to get that kind of feel to some spaces and trial it, would you be willing to help us look after them?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think students would love that.
Good, because it's shared responsibility for a different type of social space. Yeah. Okay, let's have a go at that and prioritise finding a couple of places.
Great. Thank you. In 10% of responses from DVC, students felt that the Student Futures Department isn't always available across all sites. It can be confusing to understand and students can find it difficult to get appointments. Are there any ideas to alleviate this?
Okay, that's an important one because Student Futures covers so many functions like employability and student services. So we've got to be clear that the signing is sufficient and students know where to go for help. So again, let's have a look at that together and see where the real issues are, because I think that students know what they need help with and they could help us making the messages clear. About all sites, what I'm also hoping is we have more training in Skype calls, for example, so the interviews or the appointments don't mean a student has to move from A to B or indeed a member of staff. We can do a lot of that remotely and still not lose the personal touch. So again, we'll be putting some of that in place, or we are already doing that with employability, so the first service to trial it. So I think we need to get on the front foot with this because there are some real experts and it's a shame if students don't get to them. And there's something about our structure which isn't working optimally.
So accommodation was a theme across the residential sites, with 15% of responses in Warrington just on accommodation. So some students feel that some of the accommodation is a little bit outdated. So is improving accommodation a priority for the university?
It certainly is. I think I would agree with those students because I toured around all the accommodation in Warrington a couple of weeks ago. So I'm back there again on Monday and it's one of the things we'll be picking up with Dr. Chris Haslam, who's the provost at Warrington. Now he's been asked to look at the different accommodation blocks, look at the pricing of them, whether any of them can be made a little bit more up to date, fit for purpose. So we are definitely on with the Warrington accommodation, and I think your colleague Jack Appleby is doing a fantastic job there, bringing the student voice right into the centre. So actually they'll be the first to get the microwave, I think. Thinking maybe to it.
Oh, that's good. No, I think it's an important area, especially because this will be someone's home for a year, 2, 3.
Yeah, I could not agree more. In an earlier part of my life, I actually lived in as a residential warden for a decade in a huge hall of residence. And even when I had a family, I didn't move out till my first son was 1. So I know I had hundreds of babysitters, which was great. So I know exactly why it's so important and why it needs to feel like a home from home. So yes, again, we'll need your input though, because students now are different to students, with their requirements from some years ago.
Yeah. That's great. From the responses we have had, it was a clear theme that assessment deadlines across some courses are too close together. Is there any way that this can be changed?
Most definitely, because courses are supposed to check that carefully every year, because the calendar's the same. I think what happens is different staff come on and take a module, people think, oh, we need more time to do this assessment, or they change the assessment, and they don't think then it butts up against another assessment. So I will ask all courses to do that, so we make sure that at the end of this academic year that issue doesn't arise. And also in the staff student liaison committees, that's exactly the place to raise those, and I will look carefully at the minutes to see whether that's the case.
I know from the feedback some students mentioned that being on combined honours, that this also affects them too.
Okay, so we'll start there. We'll look at the combined honours courses, and that's where the two subjects might have got a bit out of kilter, and all of a sudden the assessments occur exactly at the same time in the same week. Okay, we'll definitely have a look at that, come back to you.
Thank you.
So the most common response within the transport theme was to do with the inter-campus buses, particularly the Thornton buses. Obviously, as you know, we've got multi-sites, so access to those is paramount. The students have said that the service isn't regular enough, it's possibly not available on weekends or in non-term time, highlighted more so with the postgraduate students. So is there any way that this service can be improved?
I think that's a good point, because the postgraduates, interesting they picked that up, their student voice isn't as loud as the undergraduate student voice. So we sometimes don't plan for them quite as much, and I wonder if that's the postgraduate going to do research, needing to monitor experiments on a weekend. So I will have a look at the timetable. I've seen it arrive at Thornton when I was there, but I'm not sure of its regularity. So we'll definitely have a look at that.
Really good, thank you.
A lot of feedback from students suggests that the SU and the university need to work more collaboratively. The students put on events such as Society Showcase, which you have attended and seen the fantastic work that our students do. But this is becoming more increasingly difficult, with us being one of the lowest funded per head student unions in the country. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a challenging one. And actually on the showcase, it was brilliant. I think you actually got me dancing the Charleston the first time you brought it in, which was quite fun. There was a video apparently of that. But more seriously, the point about funding is critical. So I think what's happened here is some of the union functions have been absorbed, if you like, into the main sort of catering hospitality departments. So they're running some of the things normally a union would have to pay for. So that's where some of the money I think has gone. But I think we need to look at the engagement of students across all those societies, because the showcase was brilliant. It was so good, it needed an audience 3 times the size. So we need to get students to not just engage in the societies, and I'll have a look at how they can do that, but also to support each other's societies and go along and enjoy being the audience. So yes, we'll come back to money. I think we'll be talking to your general manager, and I think maybe I'll come to one of your execs and hear what your priorities are before the end of your term.
That'd be great.
Definitely. So with such a high number of commuting students across all of our sites, are there any plans to improve car parking?
Now, you should know by now that I'm into green things, so I'm not so keen on promoting commuting as the thing. I have to recognise that a lot of students have signed up because some of our sites are easy to commute to and less easy to get public transport to, that's for sure. So I'm more interested in getting, for example, more buses, more green transport perhaps, car sharing. That's not hardly used here. Car sharing is a big thing in other places, and I think we could probably help students with car sharing. Then you need far fewer places. At my last uni, we were in the centre of town, so it was much easier, but we actually ended up with more cycle spaces than car parking.
Okay.
So there's a sort of direction of travel, if you'll excuse the pun, that we need to think about, which isn't just replacing like for like. Car parking spaces for car parking spaces.
For many students at Chester, sport and societies are at the heart of their university life. Are there any plans for the university to invest in sports facilities, particularly when we have top-tier teams?
Yes, sports are very important here. I've been really, really thrilled when I've been staying here on an evening to actually go out and watch some of the practices and see what's going on the pitches, because they're so close to the teaching. And again, that's different. Some people university sports have to go to pitches and playing fields miles away. Here, they're so local. So it's a big part of Chester, and I think we need to look with the Director of Sport as to what we can optimise for particular sports, especially, as you say, the elite. But I'm also really interested in lots of students being able to join in for fun, the sort of play for fun approach, try something new approach. So if we do go for facilities, they're not just going to be for elite athletes, they're actually going to be available across the piece.
That's great. I know Gordon Ray has actually developed a sports strategy which looks at increasing participation at grassroots level too.
Great.
So I think it'd be great to have the availability in the sports facilities for grassroots participation as well.
Yeah, that's great.
So since the beginning of the academic year, students feel that the bar on campus has lost its community feel. The events held there are not always representative to what students want, and it's often being closed in Warrington. How can we work with you to improve this aspect of student community life?
Okay, thank you for that. As soon as we heard about the Warrington one, we did actually get into the timings of openings and things. So that's being looked at very hard, and I'll check on Monday that they made some decent progress with that, okay? Here, I think it's partly because some of it is now being run through hospitality and campus services. So again, it needs to still feel like the students are part of it. So we want more students working there, perhaps. That would help. Certainly students saying what events should be on, and actually getting involved again in the running of it in a positive way. Yeah. So it needs to have a personality, a student bar, and it's not just always the bar. Sometimes it's watching the television, meeting there for a sports game, for example. That's all part of it. So we need to check that we haven't got rid of the best part of the student culture by running it a little bit more efficiently. Yeah.
And it has just been refurbed as well, so it looks beautiful, and
it
just needs to be lived in now.
Yeah. Okay, good point. Right. Maybe there's another place I should check.
7% of the responses from the campaign has shown that at all sites, the canteens do not stay open long enough and do not always offer nutritious options. Is there any way that this can be improved?
Oh, well, I'm actually a taste tester at the moment because I'm eating in the main restaurant here at Parkgate at least 3 times a week. Actually, I'm meeting some students, which is very useful. I think we do pretty well for options. There's good vegan options, vegetarian options. There's a lot of stir-fry, street food type feel to it, which is great, and salads. So catering for international students, I mean, maybe we could have another look as to whether it's varied enough for them. I think that perhaps we've got dietetics and human nutrition students here at Parkgate, so we could probably challenge them to do an assignment and see whether we are coming up with sufficiently nutritious food and options. And then on the opening times, I agree, these are kind of the heart of the campus. They're the lively place where that you can stay and talk after the meal. So we'll have a look at keeping them open potentially just a bit longer, maybe with a reduced staffing.
It's interesting that you say that you've been eating there, because the students have picked up on it and they say that they like sort of seeing you there.
Yes, I've had lots of good conversations actually. I'm kind of working my way around the courses. It was geography last week, so I'm kind of informally, these poor students, I keep landing next to them and saying, are you enjoying your course? I'm sort of mystery shopper. It's working very well.
So something that students positively commented on was that the community feel across all sites was apparent. However, this feeling wasn't always as strong at some of our satellite sites, who sometimes feel a bit disconnected from the sort of Parkgate campus. Are there any ways in which the university can make all of our sites feel one without losing that unique satellite experience?
Yes, that's a very good point, because you as the union do a union on tour, don't you, which I think is a very, very good idea, although the Leighton students did pick up that you hadn't seen them recently, so I promised that you would. Hope that was okay. And they were interested in the community feel there because they couldn't get to Chester very easily, so we are going to hopefully make a better connection with Rees Heath, which I visited 2 weeks ago, and they have a great social life for students there, lots of sports actually, Rio, so we should know more about what they do. So that's a good example where we can connect Leighton more locally. But the other thing is, I think we should get students to realise some of the sites aren't very far apart. So for the students here, it's not far to go to Kingsway and vice versa. So the same obviously with Riverside. So the Chester campuses, it is much easier, but I don't think there's enough art and design presence on this campus, and I'm trying to increase that, showcase more student work, and they are hosting events in the Forum Shopping Centre, and I think that we should encourage our students to go there and see them, even if they're science students or studying law. Let's have a sort of whole university experience. So Warrington, likewise, we've talked about some improvements being made there. I'm going to visit Mary's house very soon. And they've also picked up on things like the restaurant, non-availability, that sort of thing. So we need to tackle that. But I think it's up to the union to help with this, because you're such an important presence and way that the students sort of get their information.
Yeah, definitely.
I know we're aiming to go out to more sites again at the end of this month on Union on Tour, so we'll definitely try and get to Leighton.
Leighton first, I promised.
Yeah, thank you. So our final question is, will you commit to an action plan based on the Dear Vice-Chancellor feedback to improve the student experience even further?
I think that's a very good idea, because it's all very well just saying things, isn't it, even if they are captured on camera. I think we could do that jointly.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's have a sort of joint executive approach where the executive, my senior team, commit to leading on particular initiatives, such as Chris leading on Warrington, and he's already doing that. So let's try and see if, between you can divvy it up. I mean, we haven't mentioned Shrewsbury, interestingly, and they're very much in my thoughts because of all the flooding. And I was down there for a couple of days last week. So again, the work that's done there with Courtney and the union there, we've got to try and draw that in and make sure that our action plan is comprehensive across all of the different sites. And means something actually to the students studying there. So we'd have to test it out. So this is a great campaign because you've had a really good response. So if I can be sure you've had a response fairly evenly from across all the sites, then we can get going.
Thank you very much. I know students will really appreciate that you've listened to their feedback.
Good, and I'm very grateful to you as the exec for actually collecting it in such a positive and systematic way. Well done.
Thank you.